So my whisk saw, the 154, stopped. Well, it didn't actually stop. I just couldn't get it started. I'm going to give it one more chance. I wanted to run it. And that was my plan. I've got smaller wood. And I had to fill in with the junk pile 572, which ran very nicely. Thank you very much. Of course, I ran the 61 the other day, and it may come out to play again, but I want to run something different. The idea is some of these saws I've put together over the years, I want to get some use out of them, right? 154 really has done pretty well. It doesn't owe me anything. But, so I picked up some of that. My son was here, and we split some and we picked it up. All on this road where I cut this in and pushed over trees with the excavator, I have, in my mind, cleanup. Not that it matters a whole lot to anyone else but me. And the approach I've been taking is, as I go through, I'll take a saw out and I'll block one up and, you know, throw it in the back of the Kubota and add to the pile that I'm going to get somewhere else. So I end up with sort of a mix of firewood. But I've got a bunch of this stuff to do, so in each one of my little saw adventures, I'll probably stop and do a little more, you know. I'll probably start and knock those. Then from the other side of the tree, I'll cut through some of the branches. And by doing that, being on the other side of that tree, it can't come through and hit me until I know how that's being pressured. I think I know, but I always try to de-stressify by having something in between me and a possible springback. It's just kind of what I do. I spend so much time out here by myself, you know. As far as saws are concerned, ran this one the other day, actually yesterday, quite a bit. And the holes form a chain that's on there works pretty good. It's about ready to get sharpened. Still cuts okay. I'm kind of curious to see how far it would go. And by the end of yesterday, I've had, I don't know, 2 or 3 tanks on it with a couple of different saws. It's got to the point where I think I need to touch it up. Now, this saw right here is a Munch Ballyhooed 262 XP. Got it from Bob. It's a nice running saw. I happen to like this bar, the Husqvarna Rancher, with a 6 rivet tip. You know, it's a pretty rugged little saw in a bar. Might be a steel chain. Yeah, this is a steel chain with the paint there. That should be a good cutting little rig right there. And of course, I've got my whisk saw because it's easy to pull over and it's lightweight. That's a 154, and it's got a speed cut on there, supposedly 20 inches, but if you kind of look at it, yeah, maybe. That's also a 20-inch bar, and that's a 28. So one of the reasons this is interesting to me is this is an older saw, right? Being a 61 Rancher originally, than the 262, which really had its heyday in the 80s. And of course the 154 was on the market pretty much the same period of time those 61s were on the market. You know, it's an older version. And also, they're different chassis, even though they're in that between 50 and 60 cc class. Of course, this one's not fair. That one's 70 cc's, but the 61 was in that same basic class. This saw right here, even though it's a 70 cc saw, having a 272 top end on it, really weighs about the same as that 262. And if you look at it, you know, the chassis, even though it's supposedly the next size up, it's really not that far off. And what you get with this chassis, I think, which is a big advantage, other than the fact that there's a gazillion of them, and these are getting kind of rare, is this is a large mount. That's a large mount bar, so I have a lot more options with this saw right here in terms of how I want to set it up. Witness the 28-inch bar, where these are small mount, which really limits what you can put on them for a bar and chain and how you set them up. And for that reason, I really haven't used them much. The 262 is one of those things where on paper and in folklore has a lot of, you know, good stuff. It just really hasn't fit in my world, partly because of the way I think it's limited on setup. You know what you can do with it. You know? And there's another reason, and this goes back to my time with a 455. I had that for a long time. And what I found was it was a small mount bar on the 455 as well, is when you get into the brush and grass and stuff like that, it was a lot more likely to toss the chain than the large mounts. And I'm not sure I understand exactly why. I can speculate, but it doesn't really matter why, it just is. And for that reason, 372, stuff like that, with a large mount bar are the ones that usually grace my my work vehicles. Unless I have a video camera, then I go back into the small mount stuff because, you know, sometimes they're interesting. You know, there's another factor. I started thinking about it for a little bit. Now, I've had that for a couple of years now, and that runs really, really well. You'll see. Well, you have seen. This one I don't have as much time on, so I really don't know. I got a little bit of time on it. I put that thing together back in like 2011. I think the first time it actually ended up on video was like 2013 maybe. And I haven't done anything to that saw except for run it. It has spent a lot of time on the shelf. I do think the only time I had to change something was the ignition. I think I had a weak coil. I think I did do that. But things like carburetor, fuel line, stuff like that have been in there for going on 15 years. You know? So at some point, it's going to be due, you know, being kind of freshened up. And that kind of brings up another point, because it's been used, I would say, on the scale of professional versus occasional. That's an occasional use saw. When I use it a lot for a little while, then it sits for a long time. And I'll probably never put enough time on a saw like that to wear it out, because I'll use it for a few weeks and then it sits for a long time. Same with these. They don't get a lot of time. Whereas my saws that I've been using for, you know, the bulk of the work, for logging, for example, not that saw hasn't been tested yet, but the Hilltop Saw Shop build 572, the blue G395 saws like that. This year it's going to be the 385 and the 572 junk piles. They get a lot of time on them, you know. And I can actually say that on the blue saw, for example, it's got a lot of time. I gave that away. Can you believe that? I had to give it away. And the reason is kind of funny, is I found myself gravitating to that thing at the expense of running other saws. And it got to the point where I'd have a project saw, or I'd have something else. I throw it into the back of the truck or the tractor. I'd go out, and all of a sudden now I want to get something done. I'd always go to that big old blue saw because it always fired up. It had all kinds of power, 28-inch bar, and it just worked. And it's one of those things where if it was in my sight, it was the one that I started running, just because I had kind of bonded with that saw. So kind of in a twisted logic, because I want to sort of spread the experience I have with different saws. Out the door it went, not because it failed in any way, shape, or form, but in fact it was the other thing. It had gotten to be too much a part of my world, to the point it was blocking out a bunch of saws that I really wanted to get time with. I just never quite got there because it was always there, and I'd pick it. saws like these. Now I'm getting the chance to run them. Can tell you right now, if I had that blue saw in here, that's the one I'd be running. And that's over my 585, and that's over my 372 Hilltop Saw Shop Special. And now that it's out the door, it's next door. It'll be used for logging. But it's out of my direct line of sight. All you have to do is start looking at the channel and recognize a whole bunch of other saws have kind of crept into the picture because it's not there to steal the oxygen from them. You know, I think there's a message in all that. I'd say number 2 on my list is I really do like the 585. I really like it. It's going to fill in the place where that blue saw was, I think, quite well. It really is. It's a nice saw to run. It's heavy. There's no doubt. It's kind of a beast. I don't know if I put them on the scales on the camera. I should. But that 585 actually weighs a pound to 1.5 pounds more than that Homelite 540 88cc saw that I was running a while back. I could not believe it when I barred them up, put oil and gas in them. The 585 was heavier by about 1 pound, 1.5 pounds, and the blue saw almost 2 pounds heavier. It was quite a bit heavier. And the 572 is only 1 pound lighter than that big old goofy Homelite. Of course, this is quite a bit lighter. You know, and the 572 is a little heavier than the 372 original editions. I have that John's thread that needs to come out and play. It was a 2171 with a 51.4 millimeter Husqvarna 372 XPW top end. That saw is a sleeper. It may come out to play now that the blue saw isn't there to steal all the fun. But today we're working on these. And like I said, it's not a pair of saws I just gravitate to. You know, a lot of it has to do with the bar limitations. I got off in the weeds there a little bit. But let's first do the race, because the one that takes the least number of pulls is the one that's going to get the call. That's not a bad saw for this job. One thing I didn't miss was the long bar on this one here, because most of my work was right up here. The 154 probably would have been a little bit nicer because it's lighter, but this is not a heavy saw. One thing I can say is that steel branded chain does what every steel branded chain does, and that's cut really well. I want to see if this restarts. I want to see how good the tune is on this one. It's actually running really nice. So that's a nice saw for that type of work. But like I say, I've been running the large mount 28s and 24s. Although I do have to say that in this particular operation, I didn't miss them at all. This 20-inch on this 262 was a nice combination. Yeah, they want their grain. So on the way out to where I'm working, I'll stop and take care of the ponies. That's an old man right there. So let's take a look here, what we got. You can tell from the ground that this is usually just swampy wet. It's fairly dry right now, but it won't stay that way. I need to cut out things like that. I don't want to be hurting the tires on this thing. Now I cut this out so I can get back in here with that John Deere 2750 I was using for skidding. And there's a bunch of these nice tops I want to come back and get. Actually, some of that I could have sold. I just didn't know it at the time. That stump has to go. And this is a little poplar. It's not worth firewood. It's not worth anything. So I just need to get it out of the way. And somewhere over here there should be a really big top, because I'd put down a tree. I was not able to. There it is. See it? I was not. Well, it looks to me like poplars have fallen on top of it. So yeah, I don't know if I can get it yet. Get this thing out of the way if I can. Yeah, see? I got a lot of firewood right here. There's that one I was talking about. That's a big tree, and I wasn't able to get it out. So I think one of my missions is try to block that stuff up and get it up and out. That's a lot of tree right there. That's the one that split right up the middle, so they had no value for log. Kind of made me sick to my stomach, because it was this enormous ash tree that looked like it was going to be beautiful, but it split right up the middle. My son was down with me earlier today, and he's trying to get himself in better shape. So I turned him loose with an axe, and he was just blasting through that stuff. And but one of the things I noticed was the axe I had given him to use. We're going to give it a try and try one versus the other, but it seemed like it broke the log versus would get down and get stuck. So let me take a couple of swings before I get started with the saw, and try one axe versus the other on that ash. This one does. Same amount of effort. Alright, so here's my conclusion. Never would have thought it, but there is a difference. This one right here works infinitely better in maple. This one right here. But it seems like it goes further in and gets stuck in ash. Where this one here with the wider, almost wedge-like, almost like a maul, seems to break the ash better. So this one's going to get the call for today. This one's going to wait for maple. And never would have thought that there would be that much of a difference.
And that's what I like about the 154. Kind of changed its tune a little bit as it got some time on it, you know, the carburetor diaphragms and stuff like that from sitting. So I need to fatten it up just a little bit. I might need to put a carb kit in the darn thing. But this saw, the 154, with this little Oregon speed cut bar and chain combo, is freaking awesome for doing work like this. You know, you can see for yourself. I'd like to have more bar length, I really would, you know, but it's so light it doesn't really matter that much. Even with my advanced age and physical issues, it doesn't bother me at all. Not really. I'm not tired from, you know, pushing on the saw or pulling on the saw or reaching, nothing like that. You know, I'm more tired from moving the logs around. So, be honest with you, this is head and shoulders above the 262 as a combination. And for this type of work, for breaking down tops like that, this thing is just butt kick. What can I tell you? You know?